Now, unusually, just at the moment, or this morning, I wasn't given a topic to speak on or a passage, which is kind of reasonably unusual for us in Bellevue. So it was left for me to decide, and we'd been doing some studies in the Psalms over the month of July, and I thought, well, maybe do another Psalm. They're standalone. It's been a good series, so I thought that's a good plan. And I'd picked a Psalm, and I'd started doing some prep. I'd bought a book in breach of Pamela's book buying ban, and then it all changed. And it all changed last weekend when Harry and I went to the cinema to see The Odyssey. Has anyone seen The Odyssey? Oh, quite a few of you. Thumbs up, thumbs down, in between. Oh, a mixed bag. Diane's not so sure. This is the kind of film of the moment. The all-star cast, if your eyesight's good enough, you can see some of them. Matt Damon, Anne Hathaway, Tom Holland, Zendaya, Charlize Theron. Now, I'm definitely in the thumbs up category. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Harry liked it too. Harry gave it how many stars, son? 5 stars. That's the top award in the Harry film review categories. I gave it 5 stars too. I thought it was a great movie. It amused me slightly because Harry had already seen it, and he was going back with his dad to watch it again. And there's one or two bits in it that are a bit gory, not for the faint-hearted. And Harry said to Pamela in advance of going, said, "Do you think Dad will be okay?" I think it's a sign of getting old when your children are concerned for your welfare going to the cinema. But anyway, but I stayed awake for 3 hours, which in itself is no mean achievement. Harry normally has to elbow me when we go to the cinema together, but I was wide awake for the whole film and thoroughly enjoyed it. There's loads of action, a good story. Of course, it's based on an ancient poem by Homer, and it's the story of Odysseus, the hero of the story, played by Matt Damon. And it's all about his journey home. Coming home is our theme this morning. He's going home after the Trojan War back to his home country, Ithaca. And on the way, he encounters many challenges and difficulties. He encounters the scary Cyclops, the witch Circe, the tempting sirens, some other monsters. He has to overcome the dangerous seas. And at home, of course, life is going on, and his family are there waiting for him. His wife, the Queen, Penelope, played by Anne Hathaway, and Telemachus, his son, Tom Holland, also appearing in Spider-Man, just in case you're interested in that. And they're, of course, wondering what's going on because their husband and dad has been away for years, for more than 10 years. No mobile phones back then. Is he dead? Is he coming home at all? What's happening? Now, the part that really caught my attention, and I think one of the reasons, or maybe the main reason I liked the film so much, was because it got me thinking. It's the kind of film that you kind of came away from and found yourself pondering, maybe when you're driving the car or when you should be working or something, and it came back to mind. And the main thing that was in my mind was the kind of struggle that Odysseus had. Now, there's no big spoilers here, so I won't ruin it for you, but towards the end of the film, it becomes clear that one of Odysseus' struggles is about whether he's worthy to come home. He had been a general in the forces that had sacked the city of Troy, and they'd sacked that in the way they did in the ancient world and really laid it to ruin. And he's troubled by this, and he feels, the way he puts it, he feels they've broken the ancient law of Zeus, basically, very broadly, that they'd not treated others as you would expect to be treated yourself. So he's grappling with the idea that there's some moral consequence for what he's done in it. Is it okay to go home? And he has to kind of work through that and overcome. And perhaps that's why Christopher Nolan, the director, is making a film about a poem that was written over 2,500 years ago. It's kind of grappling with some of the great questions of humanity. What is right and what is wrong? What's the consequence when I do wrong? When I do wrong, can I put it right? Why is my soul so restless? How do I overcome guilt and shame in my life? So if you watch the film and you pay attention, a lot of these questions are there in the background. Now, you don't have to be a genius to begin to see that a lot of these questions are questions that the Bible deals with, and there are parallels with the stories we read in the Bible too. And as I kind of thought a little bit about the Odyssey, there was 2 Bible stories or 2 Bible events that came to mind, and we've looked at them this morning. The prodigal son, which we watched in the animation earlier, and the story from David's life that Liz just read to us about David and Mephibosheth. And I began to sort of turn these over in my mind. And I thought we'd just spend a few moments this morning thinking about these two stories and how they help us with some of the questions that are raised by the Odyssey. Now let's just have a little bit of a think about David and Mephibosheth. Just to put some context on this, David is the king of Israel by the time we read this story. Mephibosheth is the grandson of David's great enemy Saul, and he's the son of his dear friend Jonathan. Now, Mephibosheth himself, it's a hard word to say a lot of times. Mephibosheth himself, as we say, a descendant of Saul. His body is broken. He's crippled. His feet are crippled. That would have placed him in a place of weakness and vulnerability in the society in which he lived. Now, his name includes the word shame, and that's perhaps a little bit of a hint at the position Mephibosheth found himself in and how the society that he lived in viewed him. He was living in a place called Lo Debar, which means nothing or no word. And the overall sense we get is, in the context he was living, Mephibosheth was not an important guy. In fact, he was vulnerable, he was weak, he didn't have any wealth, he would have actually found it hard to live at all. And David, of course, looks out for anyone from the family of Saul, and Mephibosheth is brought to him. We might have been impressed if David had maybe just done something for him. He'd maybe found him a room in the palace or a small house in the corner of one of his doubtless large estates. But David goes way further than that. He restores to Mephibosheth all that belonged to his grandfather Saul, his servants, his land. He invites Mephibosheth to eat at the king's table. He's honored as a son in the house of the king, so he receives security, honor, belonging. He is blessed abundantly. What a transformation in the life of Mephibosheth. So why does David do all this? And if you've got a Bible open, have a look at verse 3. And this is kind of the key verse for us this morning in this part of the story, if you like, in the chapter. Verse 3 says, "And the king said, 'Is there not still someone of the house of Saul that I may show the kindness of God to him?'" The kindness of God to him. David had a very clear understanding of the kindness of God as it had been shown to him, to David, in his life. And that word kindness, it's an example in the Bible. Sometimes you get a word in the English translation that we know and are very familiar with, but it's quite difficult for us to grasp just how big a word that is in Bible language, in there is language. It's a word, hesed, and it means kind of the loving kindness of God. It's a word that kind of expresses the goodness and the kindness of God's character, God's faithfulness to the promises that he makes to his people, and that he follows through and sees through the promises that is made. It's a weighty word. Do you know what I mean by that? A big word, a word that is freight with meaning, the loving kindness of God. And that's what is identified as what motivates David's heart. It's the loving kindness of God. And we see God's grace here. We see his abundant generosity. We see that how David blesses Mephibosheth has nothing to do with Mephibosheth. It's not to do with his status, his ability, his standing. It's all to do with David's heart and his love for Mephibosheth. That's what makes the difference. And out of all of this comes great blessing. And it's a transformative experience for Mephibosheth. So there was a bit to think about there as I watched the Odyssey. But the other question, obviously, that came to mind was, well, what if you struggle to come home? And this was the little bit of the story in the prodigal son that came to mind. So we're not going to look at the whole of the prodigal son, just really one part of that story this morning. And we saw it in the video. It was a part of the story where the son has gone away, he's wasted all his money, famine has come to the land, and he's ended up, in just the worst job imaginable. And he thinks, this is hopeless. How have I ended up like this? And he knows that at home is his father, and his father has land and wealth, and even the servants in my father's household are better off than this. And he doesn't feel he can go home just as a son. He's burnt his bridges, hasn't he? He's offended his father. He's done the unthinkable. He's grabbed at his inheritance and gone away and frittered it away, and the shame of that, and how much of a mess he'd made of it. And he thinks, I'll just go back and I'll just ask to be a servant. It's a transaction. He's basically saying, I'll go back and I'll ask for a job. And it'll be a better job than this, because at least I'll get a bit better conditions, better food, rather than looking after the pigs. And of course, what he does is he totally underestimates his father, which is amazing. He should have known his father. He'd grown up with him. He should know the man that he was, but yet he totally underestimates his father. And of course, his father is looking out for him. And when he sees his son coming home, he doesn't wait for him. He doesn't give him a job interview. He doesn't make him say sorry. He doesn't put anything on him. He just welcomes him home. He runs out to him and brings him back. And he restores to him his place in the family. He gives him the robe, the ring, the sandals. They throw a great big party. And he's welcomed home as a son. And once again, we see the abundant generosity of God. You know, and the Father, once again, we're seeing is what's important here is not the Son and what he's done or what he's not done, or how much he's willing to atone for the wrong that he's done, how hard he's willing to work. None of that matters. What matters is the Father's heart. So we've got three stories about coming home. The Odyssey story about coming home. And the interesting thing then, when you reflect back on Matt Damon's character in the Odyssey, he's away for a long time, for decades. And the idea is that he has to come home and he has to show skill, he has to fight battles, he has to show wisdom to steer his way through difficult situations. He has to be away long enough for him to feel that the gods, as he puts it, feel he has atoned for what he did when they sacked the city of Troy. The Bible, of course, tells a totally different story. And there's two things I'd really just like to highlight to you, just as we draw to a close this morning, about the difference between the Odyssey story and the Bible story. And the first one is this. It's how we get home. And it's what we really see in these two stories, as we've thought about David and Mephibosheth and the prodigal son, is we see little stories that are the big story of the Bible told to us really briefly. And this often happens in the Bible. Actually, God explains to us his big plan by telling us something, by the event in somebody's life or a story that Jesus told. We see the big story in the little story. And of course, there's a much greater Bible story that is much more epic than Homer's poem. It's really the story of all mankind from beginning to end. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden had everything. They had security, they had a home, they had family, they had friendship, they had fellowship. And when they disobeyed God, they were cast out of the garden. And that's a picture of how that family was broken up, how they lost all the goodness that was there. And the Bible story, from there until Revelation, is really about God's plan to restore that, to fix that, to put that right. And we get to Revelation, and we read some lovely verses in Revelation chapter 12, where God says, you know, you will be with me in heaven, and in new heaven and earth, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. And this is God saying to us, all that was lost, all that was broken, I will put back together again, and we will all be made new. And that's the great big Bible story. And that's the beginning and the end. And of course, the hugely important is the bit in the middle, where the Lord Jesus says, I will come and I will die and I will be raised from the dead, and that will allow us to put all things right. So that's the first difference between the Odyssey and the Bible story. It's how we get home. We get home not because of what we can do, how clever we are, how well we can fight the battle, how wise we are. We get home because God loves us and has given us a way to come home. And then the second thing that I want us to think about just as we close this morning is who wrote the story. Now, I'm sure Homer was a clever guy. Here we are reading his poem more than 2,500 years after he wrote it. One of the great film directors of our time making a film about it. It asks big questions about humanity in our world that he must have been grappling with all that time ago. So he was presumably a capable guy and a bright guy. But when all's said and done, Homer is just like us. He's one of us. He was a human being. He lived, he died, he had talents, he had limitations, he had flaws. But the fundamental difference with the Bible story is this: the author of the biblical story, and indeed of all humanity in the history of our world, is God himself. And indeed, he didn't just write the story. Through Jesus, he enters into the story. So he doesn't just invite us to say, you know, I've got some ideas that you might want to read about and think about. He says, I myself are going to come in to the story of our world and make it possible for you to come home. He is the author of the story. So how does this relate to us? Well, perhaps you know the restlessness of soul that comes from not being at home. Now, that whole picture of home is a metaphor, isn't it? Home being the place where we're secure, we're loved, we're known, we're comfortable. We're not judged, but we're safe and we're loved. And that's the invitation to us this morning. Now, it's an invitation to you this morning if you've been on the path with Jesus for a long time. And sometimes when you walk the path with Jesus, it's easy to be distracted. And we sing about that sometimes through many dangers, toils, and snares. We sing in Amazing Grace. And life has all of that. And we can be distracted by the dangers and the worries and the anxieties. And Jesus says to us this morning, if you've been on the path a long time but you've been distracted, I'm still here. I still love you. And I still make a way for you. And if you don't know Jesus, he says to you, look, you see that restlessness of soul that you have that hasn't been sorted by anything else you have tried? He says, come and be with me, and I will give you rest for your soul.